The church hall buzzed with gentle chatter as black-clad mourners formed loose circles, trading polite stories while they waited for Mr. Donovan Fletcher, a mall tycoon whose wealth filled papers but never hearts. Folding chairs squeaked on the glossy oak floor, yet no one spared a glance for the tiny, stooped black woman who shuffled in alone, her faded gray shawl hugged like armor against drafts and against the chill of being unseen. She paused below an arch of lilies, her kind eyes scanning the crowd, but guests stepped aside, staring at glossy programs that listed every speaker except the quiet stranger. A freckled boy, holding his father's hand, offered a shy wave, bright curiosity shining in his eyes, but the father tugged him closer, murmuring this was not the place for chatting with unknowns. The woman nodded a gentle thanks, then continued, her sensible shoes tapping while smooth jazz drifted from hidden speakers like ghosts of old nights. Huge lilies and roses crowded the aisle, flooding the air with perfume, yet polish and nervous sweat still rose, proof that even rich sorrow smells like fear. Near the front row, 3 executives joked about bonuses while pretending to comfort the widow, who dabbed her eyes with a lacy handkerchief that stayed mostly dry. The widow glanced at the elderly woman, wrinkled her powdered nose, and placed her pearl handbag on the next chair as a silent do-not-sit sign. Ushers in charcoal suits guided guests to cushioned seats, but when they reached the woman, they only pointed to the back corner, as if her presence might wrinkle the silk. She thanked them anyway, her voice a soft hum lost in the buzz, then chose a back pew where stained-glass sunbeams painted purple and gold stripes on her weather hands. While the organ played a slow prelude, teens in sleek outfits angled phones for selfies, using the glowing windows as halos and missing the woman's patient smile. A thin man with a clipboard rushed by, nearly colliding with her. Instead of apologizing, he muttered about staff entrances, sure she was catering help who'd gotten lost. She did not correct him. She simply settled deeper in her seat and removed a folded photograph, stroking its dog-eared edge with tender care. The picture showed a young soldier grinning beneath a ragged flag, and her gaze grew glassy, reflecting blues and reds of stained glass like a secret promise held for decades. 2 ladies in towering hats whispered she must be some distant cousin here for the free chicken salad at the reception, then chuckled softly as though charity were a trick rather than a virtue. They fanned themselves with programs, scattering fine lint onto the woman's lap, yet she calmly brushed it away and whispered a prayer so gentle it drifted upward like dandelion fluff. The Reverend, aligning his pages on the podium, noticed her slight frame and raised a questioning brow, but the schedule was tight and mysteries could wait. A tall cousin in a designer suit strode past, his cologne swirling like a banner of self-importance, nearly stepping on her shoe without a glance, lost in thoughts of Donovan's wild youth. Choir members adjusted robes near the altar, debating which verses to trim, so the lunch lines stayed short, and none invited the woman, though space lingered beside family pews. When the organ's final note faded, a hush fell heavy, and every head bowed as the Reverend cleared his throat. But the woman stayed upright, spine straight as a flagpole. He began praising Donovan's generous park donations and scholarships, yet each compliment floated like soap bubbles and popped quickly to those who knew his boardroom thunder. The woman listened without blinking, her hands folded atop the photograph, and if one looked closely, her thumb tapped steady dots and dashes, Morse code counting beats of memory. A baby cried, and its mother rocked the carrier, apologizing to guests who smiled thinly, though some darted annoyed looks at the woman as if the sound somehow belonged to her. Outside, clouds swallowed the sun, dimming jewel tones until the room cooled, and people shifted in designer shoes, wishing for warmth to make the ceremony feel less like judgment. The widow dabbed her eyes again, squeezing out a single tear, and glanced toward the coffin where Donovan rested in polished mahogany, gold cufflinks gleaming like trophies. Across the aisle, a gossip blogger typed notes on a pocket tablet, eager to post about the mystery mourner, until her phone buzzed. Fresher gossip proved sweeter than live grief. The woman sighed softly, remembering when funerals honored souls and not hashtags, but forgave them in her weather heart, knowing fear of silence makes people cling to screens. A distant thunder roll rattled the stained glass, and some whispered that even the sky joined the lament, yet the woman wondered if clouds wished to warn of bigger storms. The Reverend invited anyone with a memory of Donovan to speak, and silence thickened like cooling wax because the planned speakers were late and truths were dangerous to share. Guests bent over programs, unwilling to stand first, for they knew Donovan's life held sharp corners polite words could not sand smooth. Then the elderly woman placed her photo on the seat, rose slowly, and every joint creaked like old pews flexing after decades of stillness, drawing surprised breaths. Gasps fluttered like startled birds as many realized she meant speak. They traded uneasy looks, some fearing scandal, others dreading a story too long for catered schedules. The widow's lips tightened to a thin line, and she gave a sharp shake of her head toward an usher, but he hesitated, sensing that blocking grief might stain his own soul. The woman stepped into the aisle, smoothing her shawl of many mended threads, and walked toward the podium with a surprising grace, each step a soft drumbeat of patience. Each footfall echoed off high rafters, carrying authority older than marble columns, as though the building itself acknowledged her right to speak. People craned necks, guessing she was an old nanny or tutor, yet none imagined the truth resting on her steady tongue. The Reverend offered his arm, and she accepted, climbing the step. Her smile warmed him like sunrise after a fearful night, and doubt melted from his shoulders. She faced the audience, eyes bright as morning dew, sweeping each row until even the blogger lowered her tablet, feeling that screens could never capture this moment. Placing both hands on the podium, she leaned forward and, in a dawn-steady voice, said she knew Donovan long before the suits and photographs, back when he was Donnie Fields carrying a lunch pail to the factory gate. A hush deeper than any psalm settled over the hall, for in that single sentence they heard the surface of their stories crack, exposing truths no amount of rose perfume could ever hide. "Thank you for letting me speak," she began, voice clear though soft, and she told him her name was Clara Mayfield, a name almost forgotten except on one battered payroll notebook. Years ago, she explained, she and Donnie worked side by side at the Riverbend steel mill, rolling red-hot sheets that hissed like dragons whenever water cooled the rails. She was the first woman on that floor, the only black worker in the entire complex. Yet Donnie, then barely 20, offered her his extra gloves without a second thought, and grease stains marked every dream. Clara described long nights when sparks flew like orange snow, and how Donnie shielded her from crude jokes, saying his mother taught him all folks deserve the same sunrise. The crowd shifted, unsure how these soot-stained memories fit the marble coffin before them, but Clara carried on, each phrase painting the past brighter than the florist's lilies that perfume could never hide real sweat. She recalled the day an overhead crane jammed and a chain snapped, metal plates slid like cards from a giant deck, and Donnie shoved her clear, taking the blow across his back. Donnie spent weeks in a county hospital where the bed squeaked and the plaster flaked, and Clara visited nightly, reading him sports scores because televisions cost money they lacked. When the mill bosses refused to cover his bills, Clara marched to the union hall and spoke until her voice cracked, forcing a vote that saved Donnie and dozens more from debt. People in the pews glanced at one another, realizing no glossy obituary mentioned any of this, and some lowered their eyes, feeling they had applauded a statue without learning its clay, even when reporters begged for glossy tales. Clara smiled gently, not to shame but to remind, and said Donnie never forgot that fight, so when success later crowned him, he swore no worker he hired would beg for health care. Years rolled forward in her tale like freight cars, carrying Donnie west to real estate deals and supermarket chains. Yet every month he sent Clara a handwritten letter of gratitude wrapped in twine, smelling faintly of oil. She pulled one folded sheet from her shawl, its ink faded blue, and read how Donnie promised one day to repay her courage with something grand, something that could not fit in an envelope because secrets love old paper. The widow frowned, recognizing the scrollwork of young Donnie's pen, not the controlled signature she forged on holiday cards. An unease crept along her spine like cold wind and hidden from headlines all these years. Clara paused, letting the letter rest against her heart, then told of the promise fulfilled, a secret trust fund he created under her name, meant to open after his passing today. The trust, she revealed, would award full college scholarships every year to anyone from Riverbend's Mill District, chosen by a board she alone would chair in Donnie's memory. Murmurs rose, for such news had never reached the press packets, and PR managers in the front row paled, realizing their job was not to spin but to listen to living history. Clara continued, saying the fund already held $8 million untouched, earning interest while lawyers waited for legal notice that she, the unnamed partner, yet breathed. The widow's pearls rattled against each other as she gasped, because she had searched estate files all week and seen no mention of missing millions or mill town debts. Clara assured her the papers lay secure in the bank, locked with a tin picture of the steel mill as key, a picture she now lifted high for every guest to witness. The crowd leaned in, and even the choir stilled, captivated by the grainy photo of smokestacks dwarfing tiny workers who stood proudly in dirt-streaked uniforms. She traced one figure with her finger, Donnie smiling though his shirt was torn, and explained that greatness grows best when watered by kindness, not by headlines tapping out forgotten beats of dignity. Reporters in the back started live streams, their earlier boredom shattered, They sensed this simple woman was rewriting the eulogy with truths no podium script held. Clara thanked them for their interest but asked they wait, because her story held another twist. One more secret Donnie begged her to reveal only after he was gone, their boots slipping on ice as water steamed. She lowered the picture and spoke of a winter night when furnace pipes burst, flooding the mill floor with scalding brine, trapping 6 workers on an overhead platform. Emergency crews were hours away through icy roads, she recalled, and Donnie, ribs still weak from the crane injury, rigged a shaky ladder and went up despite warnings. He carried each man down while Clara steadied the ladder feet, her gloves smoking from heat echoing down brick walls and steel rails. Doctors said Donnie's lungs would scar forever, but he brushed it off, laughing that breathing was easy after sharing ribs with molten steel one time, already each mind measuring itself against his grit. Clara looked at the coffin and whispered that laugh sounded like gravel sliding into sunshine, a sound she feared the world would forget without these stories. Guests wiped eyes they did not expect to wet. Some felt shame for ignoring the storyteller at the door. Others felt hope that valor still hides beneath ordinary jackets. The Reverend, voice thick, asked if Donovan wished those rescues shared, and Clara nodded, saying he worried pride might cloud intent, so he waited for this moment and lanterns cannot guide without wicks. She explained that Donnie believed funerals should light lanterns for the living, guiding them to act better tomorrow rather than praising yesterday with empty words. Phones now recorded freely, but cameras no longer felt intrusive. Instead, they served as mirrors, reflecting each listener's resolve to honor courage with action. Clara unfolded a second document, a simple sheet titled Community Health Clinic Deed, and said Donnie purchased the abandoned mill site last year and willed it to her oversight, though shame burned like molten slag inside. The building, she revealed, would be reborn as a free clinic for mill families still battling lung disease, just as Donnie once did, ensuring iron dust never claimed another child. A hush fell again, broken only by soft sobs from a manager who recalled denying workers masks to cut costs. His tears splashed onto polished shoes like tiny confessions. Clara reached into her pocket and produced one battered steel mill badge, Donnie's first, its number etched deep, and placed it atop the coffin as if crowning a king with honest tin. She told the gathering that real titles are forged, not inherited, and that Donnie's greatest wealth was carried in scar tissue and in promises kept beyond the spotlight. The widow stood, trembling, and whispered an apology that fluttered like a sparrow's wing, yet Clara simply nodded, offering peace instead of blame, for grief grows lighter shared. Executives who had joked earlier now bowed heads, whispering silent pledges to fund the clinic, while the teenage selfie crew tucked phones aside, cheeks flushing with renewed respect. Clara concluded by inviting all to visit Riverbend when the clinic opened, to watch steel ghosts turn into healing rooms, and to remember that ignored voices may carry the answers we need. Clara waited until the rustle of tissues stopped, then turned another page of memory, saying she still had to speak of the night Donnie left the mill forever and began the climb to malls and money. So deep winter snow had filled the streets that trucks could not reach the factory, and workers walked a mile through ice like broken glass that cracked beneath their boots with every heavy breath they took. Inside the mill, the heaters failed, so breath became white steam, and metal sheets cooled too fast, jumping off rollers like wild horses, throwing sparks that hissed in freezing air. The foreman ordered everyone to keep running lines, worried a lost shift would cost the company a government contract, and no one dared argue, because jobs were rare as spring flowers. It felt larger than words can tell. Donnie spoke up for the crew, saying cold steel cut like knives, but the foreman laughed and called him a dreamer who should try selling toys instead of making tanks. The crew looked at the floor, knowing truth, yet afraid, and Clara felt anger burn hotter than any forge because fear should never kill good workers for a boss's bonus. It felt larger than words can tell. She and Donnie gathered brave hearts and led a walkout, standing outside in snow that stacked high on caps, forming a silent wall of people who refused unsafe orders. The company called police, who arrived in heavy coats, their badges glinting like frost, telling strikers to leave or face arrest for blocking war work. Clara told the officers her father fought in World War II so others could speak, and that freedom meant nothing if workers froze for bullets instead of living for peace. It felt larger than words can tell. One old officer nodded, stepped back, and turned his coat against the wind, letting silence answer richer men who hid in warm offices behind the line of blue. A reporter from the local paper drove up, camera shaking in numb hands, snapping photos of frost-coated faces lit by street lamps, and Donnie spoke into the lens with plain words a child could read. It felt larger than words can tell. He said, "A good tank rolls smoother when the people who made it stand tall, not when they lie in hospital beds. And the next day, every headline shouted those words like trumpets. The company lost that contract but gained respect because the Army saw honor in caring for workers who built shields, and soon new orders arrived along with safer rules. It felt larger than words can tell. Donnie, now the voice of courage, was asked to join talks in the state capitol, and Clara joined him, sitting in drafty rooms where law writers listened to steel dust stories. Those talks wrote the first cold weather safety code, and factories statewide installed better furnaces, saving lives each winter, though textbooks forget the name of the brave janitor who suggested the idea. It felt larger than words can tell. The crowd in the church gasped when Clara said she was that janitor, for she cleaned offices after the mill shift to pay her mother's doctor bills, yet still found time to fix the world. She lifted a second badge, the janitor tag, dull brass worn smooth, and placed it beside Donnie's mill badge on the coffin, two small medals brighter than gold. Phones flashed as if paparazzi had discovered hidden royalty, yet Clara smiled shyly, saying heroes are just folks who choose right even when tired and poor. The Reverend wiped tears, whispering that faith without deeds is sleep, and the choir hummed amen, their tunes soft like blankets around a cold heart. But Clara was not finished. She said Donnie's road to riches began the day they walked out, because investors noticed a young man who protected people before profit. It felt larger than words can tell. An inventor named Mrs. Lopez, who made folding garden carts, hired Donnie to manage her startup, and Clara followed as warehouse chief, though she feared leaving home. Together they turned carts into a company that grew fast, and when investors wanted to push Clara aside, Donnie tore up contracts, saying loyalty outweighed checks. The crowd listened wide-eyed because business magazines had printed a different tale that erased Clara like chalk under rain, but truth now stood taller than headlines. Clara said she left the firm after 5 years to care for her sick sister, and Donnie sold his shares later, using profits to buy land where his first mall would rise. It felt larger than words can tell. Yet every December, he mailed Clara half of that sale, wrapped around a handwritten note that simply read for the next fight, and she used it to start night classes for single parents. More than 300 parents have graduated since then, she added, many watching this live stream right now, raising hands from factory floors, diner counters, and city buses. A waitress in row 6 gasped and waved. She finished that program last spring, learned coding, and yesterday installed security software at the very mall built on Donnie's dream. The widow pressed fingers over trembling lips, realizing her husband had hidden a second life filled with quiet gifts, never spoken at charity galas or printed on donor walls. Executives whispered among themselves about revising annual reports, but Clara cleared her throat, reminding everyone that reports are empty if they forget beating hearts. It felt larger than words can tell. She asked the crowd to close eyes, breathe in, and picture one person they could lift today, because small lifts build towers higher than money ever will. Even the blogger obeyed, eyes shut, thumb still on record, imagining giving free ads to a food pantry instead of selling gossip clicks. When Clara told them to open eyes, the church felt brighter, as though stained glass had gained an extra sun behind cloudy skies, and people smiled at strangers like new friends. Then she shared the last story Donnie made her promise to tell, about a secret letter he wrote to the young boy he once was, sealing it inside a time capsule under the mall fountain. The letter, she said, asked teenage Donnie to forgive his absent father and pass that forgiveness to others, for bitterness seals more coffins than old age ever could. Tomorrow at dawn, Clara will open the capsule with a mayor, and she invited anyone, even reporters, to watch forgiveness rise with the sun and dance on fountain spray. A hush of wonder settled again. No one reached for phones because memory wrote sharper pictures than pixels when real souls spoke. Clara ended by saying the best tombstone is not marble, but living people helped by hands now still, and she asked if anyone wished to join her in that work. The aunt who mocked free chicken salads stood first, promising to fund 10 scholarships. Others rose, pledging clinic supplies, job training, or just time to read letters to lonely elders. Clara nodded, tears shining, because change had begun before the coffin closed. Proving Donnie's final plan worked, spark hearts through truth told at the right moment, by the right witness. The organist started to play, but Clara raised a gentle hand, asking 1 minute more, and she bent to the coffin, whispering, "Rest easy, partner, our shift is covered," then stepped down as applause thundered like rolling steel. Clara returned to her back pew, but before she could sit, a gray-haired attorney rose from the family row, holding a thick binder tied with blue ribbon, clearing his throat like a trumpet needing to speak truth. He said his name was Mr. Whitaker, executor of Donovan's main estate, and he admitted that until 5 minutes ago, He had no idea a separate file existed that named Clara the head trustee of the Hidden Fund. Whitaker bowed to her, then told the room that honesty at a funeral is rare and precious, and that he would honor the new facts at once, even if they rewrote balance sheets and proud memories. A ripple of surprise moved through the pews like wind in tall grass, and several guests who had snubbed Clara earlier stared at the floor, cheeks warming with the sting of sudden regret. Whitaker unlocked the binder, removed a heavy envelope sealed in red wax, and asked if Clara would come forward once more so he could place the papers in her rightful care. She walked the aisle again, slower now, because grief and relief weighed the same, yet each step still echoed calm faith that promises keep walking even when legs grow tired. When she reached the lawyer, he bowed and handed her the envelope along with a smaller velvet box marked "Only Open with Community," sparking whispers of what treasure rested inside. Clara thanked him, then turned to the crowd, explaining that Donnie always loved symbols, and that whatever lay in the box should be shared in daylight at the mill site, not beneath a roof of sorrow. The widow, voice thin, asked to speak next. Clara nodded, trusting that truth heals best when spoken aloud. The widow stepped to the podium, smoothing her black dress as though neat seams could mend a torn heart, and began with a shaky confession that she had never visited Riverbend or asked Donnie about his scars. She admitted she liked diamond galas more than smoky tails, and that she pushed him to polish his story until it sparkled, because luxury crowds clap louder for shiny myths. Tears slid down her rouge, and she said she now saw the shine came from heat, not glitter, from forged fires that shaped a man braver than the mansions he later bought. She turned toward Clara and asked for forgiveness, promising to support the clinic and the scholarships, even if it meant selling a beach house that had never felt like home. Clara answered with a single nod and a gentle smile, proving mercy is not weak but wide, able to fit two hurting people inside without breaking. The nod felt like warm bread shared on a cold morning, and even those at the back sensed inner walls crumble. A cheer rose from the rear pew where former mill hands sat, and one old worker shouted that Donnie would be proud to see bridges built instead of walls painted in perfume. His words bounced off stained glass, rising higher with every echo. Whitaker raised a hand for calm and said legal steps would follow, but today belonged to memory and mission, not to courts or ledgers. He reminded them that ledgers can wait a day, but broken spirits cannot. He suggested a formal reading of the will at the reception hall, so the service could end in peace, and the Reverend agreed, tapping his watch yet smiling in relief. The choir stood and sang an old Union hymn about lifting one another higher than steel beams, and many guests joined, their timid voices finding strength in shared notes. Even the teen selfie crew sang, stumbling over lyrics yet feeling history braid their modern slang with something older and steadier. While music filled the rafters, Clara looked around and saw strangers holding hands, board members beside janitors, sorrow beside hope, and she whispered thanks to Donnie for weaving such a moment. Thunder rolled again outside, but this time the sound felt like applause from a sky proud of courage below, and colored light flickered across polished shoes like confetti. When the hymn ended, the Reverend closed his Bible and declared the formal service complete, inviting all to the reception where stories and sandwiches would mingle. Ushers opened side doors, letting cool air sweep inside, and the scent of rain mixed with lilies, scrubbing the room of stale pride. People lined up to pass the coffin, some touching the mill badge, some touching the janitor tag, many whispering vows to live kinder lives. Even those who had never touched steel felt the cool honesty of metal, pressing fingers to lips as if sealing private promises. The gossip blogger streamed the line live, her usual snark replaced by quiet awe, and she asked viewers to give to the clinic fund instead of sending emoji reactions. Whitaker stood near the exit gathering business cards from executives now eager to help, threading each into a ribbon so no promise slipped away in the bustle. Nearby, a shy boy asked Clara to sign his program. She wrote, "Be brave every day," and the boy grinned like sunrise even in the rain shadow of grief. The widow approached Clara again, this time carrying the pearl handbag but holding it open, saying she no longer needed symbols of wealth hidden in leather. She pulled out a diamond brooch shaped like a lily and placed it in Clara's palm, asking that the stone be sold to buy medical masks for clinic workers. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she accepted the brooch, promising it would sparkle on the first newborn saved from mill dust, a brighter jewel than any gala could boast. Suddenly, a young reporter rushed up, microphone shaking, asking how it felt to attend a billionaire's funeral, and Clara laughed softly, saying truth is not an earthquake but a sunrise. Only those who sleep late call it sudden. The reporter blushed at Clara's gentle joke and promised her article would use clear words so every school kid could understand how truth changed a room. At that moment, the church bell tolled noon, each gong deep and certain, reminding everyone that time keeps marching whether we use it well or not, a sound that echoed to the stone walls of the porch. Clara tucked the envelope and velvet box into her shawl, feeling their weight settle like a promise against her heart, and she knew her real work was only just beginning. She looked toward the exit where drizzle winked on stone steps and imagined raindrops striking the old mill roof miles away, each tap a drumbeat telling workers help was coming. As the crowd moved out, a gust flipped open the church doors and scattered a stack of unused programs, pages spinning like white birds set free from narrow cages. Children chased the fluttering sheets, laughing, and parents let them, sensing joy belonged in a story about hope rising from loss. Laughter mixed with rain on eaves, stitching playful color into the day's gray cloth. Whitaker collected scattered programs and told Clara he would reprint them with her story inside, turning litter into lessons for future guests. Clara thanked him but asked that her name appear only beside Donnie's mill photo, believing humility keeps stories alive longer than credit lines. Outside, she lifted her face to the soft rain and whispered, "Rest easy, partner," while thunder faded like a mighty engine settling, its work proudly done. The reception hall next to the church smelled of warm rolls and coffee, yet over that homely scent floated an exciting buzz, as if each light bulb above the buffet hummed with fresh purpose, showing food compare with brave ideas and setting the tone for better talk later. Clara entered last, rain dots on her shawl, and saw executives arranging plates for elders, their shiny watches forgotten while they searched for ways to prove they had learned compassion, their eyes new to humble service as hope replaced the old hunger for praise. On a small stage, Whitaker tapped a microphone, promising a quick reading of Donovan Fletcher's updated will, though everyone sensed it would change far more than numbers, making the clock seem to pause. He confirmed the hidden trust, handed Clara a binder labeled Riverbend Foundation, and cameras clicked to record Hope gaining legal form, its gold title catching bright light like a spark begging dry tinder to ignite. The widow stood beside him and pledged to match the $8 million with her own funds, a quivering voice bright enough to chase off lingering pride. Her rings sparkled, yet her hands shook like lightning inside a storm of change. Gasps rippled, a caterer dropped a spoon, yet applause blossomed like early flowers poking through snow of regret. Cranberry dot stained cloth unheeded, yet nobody minded a new stain of joy. Clara thanked her, then raised the velvet box and invited everyone to gather close. For Donnie had said the gift inside belonged to community. The word rang like a recess bell echoing off chandeliers bright with dust. Even shy mourners edged forward, forming a ring that stretched from bankers to bus drivers, from curious kids to the gray-haired choir director clutching her hymn book. Shoulders touched shoulders, weaving strangers into one big quilt. Clara broke the seal. Inside lay an iron key shaped like a question mark. Its bow cut into the letters RBS, the old mill brand. It felt heavy in her palm, yet lighter than old lies ready to click open forgotten doors. Beneath the key rested a stained map of the mill grounds. One storehouse marked in red and labeled Museum starts here. Creases like wise face wrinkles still bright despite years in a drawer. A note in Donnie's hand asked that the space be filled with real stories, hard hats, pay stubs, and the jokes that kept crews upright when sparks flew. It smelled faintly of engine oil and peppermint, pulling even the shy closer. Tears blurred Clara's sight, but she pinned the map to a corkboard Whitaker fetched, needing clear eyes for the work ahead. The board leaned against a punch bowl stand, turning a snack table into command post. Kids helped mark dots, the breaker room where Donnie was hurt, the locker aisle where Clara first tied her bandana, the dock where their walkout began. One girl pasted a sticker star on the rescue spot, earning her a grin nearby. Each became a promise, and soon the map looked like a night sky thick with bright stars. Yarn tied memories together. That web promised history would hold firm. A retired safety inspector offered his archive of reports, joking that even sad papers can save lives in proper light. His dented hat felt like gold, and everyone nodded at the simple truth. A teacher offered her class to record worker stories, explaining that 7th graders love microphones almost as much as games. Classmates on video cheered, their screens lit up with emojis. Laughter warmed the room, and the reception felt less like goodbye, more like launching a ship named Better Tomorrow. Someone tapped a cup like a drum roll, and forks rattled like tiny cymbals. Whitaker pledged pro bono paperwork, and the mayor's aide reserved a council slot to fast-track permits. Notes sketched ramps, not profits, showing the law can smile when it chooses. A jar labeled Clinic Mask Fund appeared by dessert, and diamonds clinked against folded bills sweeter than lemon bars. Glass jar mirrored giving hands, and coins chimed like tiny church bells. The shy boy guided his father to the corkboard, pointing at the ladder rescue. and whispering that heroes can look like tired neighbors. Dad saved story for bedtime, which he would retell later with pride. Rain eased, sunlight cut through high windows and rainbow prisms danced over the map, as if stained glass had followed to bless new plans. The strip of sunlight paved a golden road across the floor, pointing to doors. Clara held up the key and asked who would drive to the mill that afternoon. Because momentum, like molten steel, cools fast when left alone, she compared cooling steel to promises kept, and heads nodded. Hands rose. A bus owner texted for coaches. Excitement trumped schedules. A florist offered leftover roses for the museum door, saying petals soften tough places. Sandwiches vanished as folks loaded pockets with napkins, and the caterer beamed, calling it the happiest stampede he had served. He boxed extra sandwiches free. Soon the parking lot hummed with engines, umbrellas closed, people sharing GPS pins that pointed to Riverbend like pilgrims finding a shrine. Taillights formed a red necklace stretching toward the horizon. Clara rode shotgun in the widow's car, envelope on her lap, brooch in pocket. The velvet box now empty yet still precious, ready for future surprises. GPS mispronounced Riverbend, laughter easing tension. The widow admitted she feared the ruins, but Clara said ghosts retire once the living finish old stories. She saw bricks regain red life as hearts healed. Smokestacks appeared, rusty pipes jutting like pencils waiting for new words. Rust snow fell on velvet shoes without complaint while a drone streamed cheers worldwide. At the gate, the iron key clicked the lock, open like the final note of a long song. Weeds left green marks on slacks, but nobody cared. Inside, weeds waved between rails and pigeons cooed, yet nobody cared about mud on dress shoes. The ground had earned respect. The aide's phone landed on welding gloves unharmed. Forms were signed. The first step live streamed, her voice shaking with hope. The echo drummed goosebumps on teens. In the shed, Clara tapped the old worker rhythm. 1, 2, pause 3, and former hands echoed it, tears shining while roof holes spotlighted glitter dust. The widow stared upward and admitted greed looked small under beams built to carry rivers of fire. Fresh air smelled of iron rain older than perfume. They found crates of unused blue hard hats. Clara placed one on her curls, and kids followed, the shed turning into a carnival of safety as pigeon feathers fell and kids chased them laughing. A battered chalkboard rolled out, and tasks were listed in letters even a 6-year-old could read. Roof patch, window fix, hazard tape out. Chalk squeaked like cracking ice, making adults grin. A developer offered roof money but wanted his logo. Clara refused, saying the only brand allowed was courage, spelled in rust and paint. The crowd's cheer bounced louder than horns. As sun angled low, Clara announced Donnie's time capsule letter would be read at dawn, inviting anyone to camp overnight with cocoa and songs under steel stars. Steam rose like stage fog. People called babysitters and moved meetings, deciding some moments are worth bending calendars. Parents texted they'd be late. Dust fireworks saluted hard work. Car horns signaled supply runs. Clara glanced at dusty rafters, imagining Donnie swinging his lunch pail in approval. She pictured nickel lunch Donnie smiling wide. She whispered, shift change, partner, history clocked us in, and the new crew of Volunteer. Families arrived with tents and thermoses as crimson dusk wrapped the old mill in sleepy colors, and they spread blankets over cracked concrete so children could lie back and trace shapes in the broken roof stars. A brass band from the high school marched in, practicing softly between rows of scrapped rail, the trumpets turning rusted beams into echo chambers that made even simple scales sound like opening music for a brave tomorrow. Catering vans returned with cocoa and stew, and servers who once carried grief trays now ladled comfort, laughing when steam fogged their glasses and made them look like snowmen guarding pots of hope. Clara walked every corner with a flashlight, greeting newcomers by name when she could and with a warm handshake when she could not, proving respect travels fastest through simple touch. The widow followed a few steps behind, scribbling pledges in a small notebook, her diamond ring catching lamplight like a spark each time she wrote down another tool or truck offered. At 9 o'clock, Whitaker climbed a pallet stack and read safety rules drafted by the kids, cheerfully announcing that helmets must stay on heads unless someone needed to scratch an itch or adjust ideas. The rules made workers grin, and one team taped the list to a lamppost, the moonlight itself seeming to sign approval in silver ink across the heading, "Be kind or be gone." Generators hummed alive, spilling pools over floor bars, and volunteers swept in rows, pushing decades of dust into mountains children pretended were pyramids hiding treasure maps to better days. A forklift driver carefully lifted old machinery onto trailers bound for recyclers, and kids clapped every time a hook latched tight, as though they were watching circus tricks instead of careful cleanup. Even pigeons joined the night shift, cooing from rafters when music rose from a Bluetooth speaker that alternated between old Union songs and pop hits everyone knew. Clara paused under the rescue ladder spot and told a nearby crew that fear never walks alone where friendship keeps watch, and someone painted those words on a board to hang above the future clinic door. Midnight rolled in cool and quiet, but campfires built in rusty drums glowed steady, their crackle blending with distant cricket choirs that seemed pleased to headline such an honest festival. A former foreman apologized to Clara for past silence, offering a framed portrait of the first women's shift he once dismissed, and she accepted with a smile that forgave more than his long speech could reveal. Reporters streamed interviews, but none asked for tears. Instead, they asked volunteers to share one dream they had for the clinic, and answers ranged from dental chairs to a rooftop garden full of mint. Some teens set up a projector on an old brick wall and showed black and white photos of the mill's history, cheering loudest when a shot of young Donnie and Clara sharing lunch flickered into view. The night air turned cooler, and parents zipped coats around sleepy children, yet nobody left, because leaving felt like walking out of a story before the last page flipped open. At 3 a.m, the janitor badge glinted from the coffin stand they had brought, serving as a temporary altar where people placed handwritten promises folded small like origami cranes. Clara read each one to herself, nodding at offers of tutoring, carpentry, or simply listening ears, and she tucked the papers into a tin lunchbox once carried by Donnie on his earliest shifts. Stars twinkled through the roof, and an astronomer volunteer pointed out constellations, explaining how sailors use them to chart courses, much like tonight's crew was steering toward healthier shores. Before dawn, the band returned, horns muted with cloth so as not to wake toddlers, and they rehearsed the hymn the crowd wanted to play when the capsule letter finally breathed fresh air. A gentle hush spread as the sky blushed pink. Even generators hushed as if they understood ceremony, and cell phones switched to silent, screens glowing like votive candles in modern hands. Clara rang a small bell salvage from the mill whistle line, and its clear note chased last yawns away, calling the overnight shift to gather by the fountain where moss-coated dry stone. The mayor arrived with a locksmith, and they knelt beside Clara, chiseling mortar around the capsule plate, sparks dancing across shoes while the crowd held one collective breath for history. With a plaque lifted free, Clara reached in and pulled a metal canister, warm from friction, edges dented but seal unbroken, and she cradled it like a fragile bird rescued from a storm drain. She unscrewed the lid, drawing out a thick envelope marked "To the boy I was," then handed it to the widow, trusting her to voice the husband she never fully knew. The widow unfolded the letter, voice trembling but steady enough for every ear, and she read how teen Donnie forgave his father, promised to build bridges, and asked future readers to do the same with their own heavy hearts. Tears mirrored dewdrops on steel rails as the letter explained that money measures walls, not love, and that the bravest plan is to lift someone without expecting applause. The widow paused, overcome, and Clara finished the last lines, describing a future where a boy from broken streets could learn medicine in a free clinic standing on furnace bricks made kind. Cheers rose like early birds taking flight, and the band burst into the Union hymn, this time in full brass harmony, while the sun finally crowned the smokestacks in liquid gold. A drone captured the moment, but more important was the choir of real voices promising to start tearing out rusted pipes that very afternoon after sleep and pancakes. Whitaker signed interim deeds on the hood of a pickup, and the mayor stamped approvals with a pen borrowed from a schoolgirl who giggled at seeing adults line up for her signature pen. As shadows shrank, Clara handed the iron key to the shy boy, saying he would cut the ribbon when the museum opened, and he tucked it in his pocket like superhero gear. A bus driver offered free rides to bring seniors for future health checks, and a roofer measured beams, explaining which trust could host solar panels to power exam rooms. Even the pigeons seemed to coo in agreement, fluttering through rising sunbeams that painted fresh halos around dusty helmets. Breakfast stations popped up, waffle scent mingling with motor oil, proof that sweet and grit can share the same air without argument. Clara glanced at the empty velvet box and remembered Donnie's words, "A gift is only heavy until you give it away," and her shoulders felt lighter than clouds. She turned to the widow, now smiling through tears, and invited her to join the first construction crew, promising no special treatment except unlimited laughter. The widow accepted, rolling up silk sleeves to reveal surprisingly strong arms ready to swing a hammer for the first time. A photographer snapped a picture of the two women bumping elbows beneath the towering stacks, and everyone agreed the image would headline the museum lobby. Finally, as workers fetched tools, Clara climbed a scaffold, looked out at the bustling ground, and declared, "Shift has started, friends. Let's weld kindness into every beam until the world shines brighter than these rising sparks. Summer arrived 3 months later, and bright banners welcomed everyone to the grand opening of the Riverbend Community Clinic and Mill Museum, two dreams sharing one sturdy roof of new tin sheets. Clara stood at the entrance beside the shy boy, who now wore a crisp white hard hat marked Captain of Keys, his grin wide enough to rival the sunrise spilling over fresh paint. Families queued along the street, each person holding a small piece of mill history, rusty bolts, old pay stubs, even a dented lunch pail, ready to place them in glass cases that would teach future kids where courage begins. The mayor cut a ribbon of braided red bandanas donated by former workers. The confetti cannons puffed harmless clouds of recycled paper that fluttered like playful pigeons before settling on proud shoulders. Inside, walls once coated in grime now gleamed with murals painted by middle school artists, showing Clara and young Donnie guiding sparks that transformed into stars lighting paths for ordinary people. The first exhibit held the steel mill badge and janitor tag resting side by side, their simple metal faces reflecting every child's wide eyes like mirrors saying, "You too can help." A hologram of Donnie greeted visitors in calm recorded words, thanking them for choosing kindness today, and several guests wiped tears at hearing his gravel laugh echo softly through spotless halls. Across the lobby, a bronze plaque named Clara Mayfield as founding partner, though she kept calling herself shift supervisor, insisting fancy titles sometimes block doorways where bigger ideas need to pass. The widow, wearing jeans smudged with primer, led a tour group through clinic rooms stocked with new exam tables, gladly explaining that the diamond brooch had become 1,000 protective masks and a pediatric microscope. A nurse demonstrated the lung scanner funded by the blog audience's donations, showing a startled teenager how quick puffs of air could map hidden dangers and stop them before they grew into storms. In the dental room, a 7-year-old sat bravely while colorful drills hummed, and his mother cried happy tears because treatment that once cost a month's rent now asked only a smile and a promise to brush nightly. The museum level buzzed with storytellers recording oral histories. A retired inspector described the night heaters failed, and 6th graders typed his words into tablets, pausing to ask clear questions so no facts slipped away. Volunteers in bright vests guided guests to try a virtual reality walkout, where players linked digital arms and felt controllers rumble when they stood strong, learning that safety sometimes grows louder than fear. Downstairs, the cafe served cocoa and steel-cut oatmeal sweetened with local honey, honoring the overnight crews who once kept vigil under broken roofs. Steam rose in gentle swirls like shy applause. Whitaker, sipping coffee, announced that scholarship applications had opened online, and screens near the register showed ticking counters racing upward as Riverbend teens clicked submit with hopeful hearts. Outside, a brass band struck the first notes of the Union Hymn, now the clinic's theme song, and the melody danced across parking lot tents hosting free blood pressure checks and coding demos. The shy boy climbed a short ladder and fitted the iron key into a ceremonial lock on the museum door, then whispered, "All clear," like a true shift leader, earning cheers that rattled window panes in the happiest way. Clara pressed a big green button labeled Start Audio Tour, and speakers played recorded laughter from that first overnight cleanup, reminding everyone that hard work can sound like music when shared. Visitors wandered into the break room of promises, a quiet corner where handwritten notes from the funeral reception lined corkboards, each promise stamped complete or I in progress with bright stickers. A retired bus driver pointed at his note, "Free rides for seniors," now marked complete, and he chuckled, saying the sticker felt better than any paycheck he ever cashed. Screens displayed real-time footage of the mill's roof, already half covered in solar panels installed by the roofer who once measured beams at dawn, proving words hammered quickly into deeds. The widow joined Clara near the time capsule case, where Donnie's letter rested under gentle light, pages sealed behind clear glass so ink would never fade, but its message could travel without tiring. A little girl asked why forgiveness mattered, and Clara knelt, explaining in plain words that carrying anger is like lugging rusty metal in your backpack. Sooner or later, it pokes holes in your joy. The girl nodded solemnly, then raced off to the VR walkout, eager to test courage on digital snow, her ponytail bobbing like a flag of new hope. Journalists filmed every corner, yet none hunted scandal. Instead, they captured fathers reading exhibit labels to toddlers and teens teaching grandparents how to scan QR codes for healthy eating tips. Near noon, the clinic's first patient arrived, an old mill welder coughing in soft bursts. Nurses guided him gently, and cheers erupted when he emerged smiling with medicine in hand and zero bill attached. That smile, broad but shaky, spread across the crowd faster than any headline, turning strangers into sudden cousins linked by shared relief. Clara rang the salvage mill bell once more, announcing the first scholarship recipient, a waitress who had cheered at the funeral, would start nursing school in the fall with all fees paid. The room exploded with claps and foot stomps, and she blushed scarlet, promising to return for night shifts until classes began. Her promise joined the board under "In Progress" in fresh marker ink. A drone swooped overhead streaming live video, and online viewers donated so quickly that the clinic fund ticker scrambled to keep up, numbers flipping like excited fish leaping in bright water. On a balcony, the teenager who once lived blog gossip now hosted a live stream teaching viewers how to build community jars, proving careers can pivot when hearts do. At mid-afternoon, storm clouds gathered, but instead of dread, the crowd welcomed cool drops, recalling how rain washed pride from the church roof on the funeral day that changed everything. Children squealed, streaking across wet pavement, and no parent fussed about damp clothes because outside joy matched inside mission. Puddles reflected banners reading "Shift in Progress" like shiny mirrors to the sky. As thunder rumbled, Clara addressed the crowd from the museum steps, microphone steady, saying the mill once forged tanks, then malls, and now it would forge healthier lives and kinder towns far beyond Riverbend. She reminded them that steel bends when heated, and so do people. The trick is cooling into a shape that can hold others up without snapping under new weight. The widow stepped beside her, raising a hammer borrowed from the tool room, and tapped a ceremonial nail into a wooden beam engraved with today's date, sealing the day like a signed chapter heading. Together they hung a small sign above the entry, "Every bright tomorrow clocks in today," and cameras flashed, but more important were the nods from kids who mouthed the words twice to remember. Evening lights flicked on, casting golden pools that mingled with fading storm light, and jazz musicians set up where furnace sparks once flew, their saxophones weaving new warmth through cooling air. Clara watched people dance between exhibit cases and clinic doors, and she imagined teenage Donnie on that platform again, lunks